What is this? Don't even say that he was Hassan that helps them. Journalism isn't a threat to anyone who isn't hiding genocide. No, I'm saying that journalism is a threat to Israel, which is why Israel is murdering journalists. If journalism wasn't a threat to Israel, because exposure of its war crimes wasn't a threat to Israel, they wouldn't have to shut out the rest of the world from seeing the truth actively. It wouldn't kill so many journalists. They're not even trying to not do war crimes. I mean, it's just like they're doing a genocide. They don't give a shit. Anyway, here is Donald Trump's exclusive interview with Brett Baer. Apparently, they are releasing segments of it now on Fox News. I'd like about aid workers so that they could legitimize the targeting of aid workers and journalists alike. An entire unit tasked with finding fake shit, making fake shit up about any Palestinian journalist whatsoever so they could justify the murder of all Palestinian journalists. Now, even with a department specifically tasked with this goal, they've still done a horrible job. And I think part of the reason why they've done a horrible job of actively creating a narrative that legitimizes these operations is because Israel understands that there is no opposition to these incredibly violent actions. There's no opposition whatsoever. What? The great Palestinian journalist Anas al-Sharif, watching the Israeli military spokesperson threaten him last month, said, "He wants me to stop coverage. He wants to threaten. He wants to bomb. The message will go out until our last breath. We are not afraid." This was a video by journalist Ibrahim Nufal, brother of Mohammed Nufal, one of the 5 other journalists killed alongside Anas al-Sharif on Sunday. Yeah, Anas al-Sharif literally personally got threatened by the Israeli military spokesperson. And then a month later, Israel killed him. And people still entertain the notion that this person was like an active threat to Israel. And he was, but through his journalism. An active threat to Israel by any other means is ridiculous. Wrong link. Here's the offer he got. In an interview, Anas al-Sharif's brother revealed that just 4 days before his assassination, Anas was offered a tempting deal to leave Gaza with his family in exchange for halting his coverage of the situation there. He firmly refused.
To focus on our country, but I'm doing this to save a lot of lives. Yeah, very severe. Thank you very much, everybody.
You like doing those things?
It's almost like a competition. It's like winning at golf. You know, they're coming in. Every question is a kill. They hope you're going to make a mistake. They're looking, and they had a field day with Biden. That's why he didn't do it.
But you're making any news there?
I don't think so. Nothing. I always go out. I say, is there breaking news? In other words, when I leave, if there's breaking news, that's a bad thing. That means they got me on something. Let's go.
After you.
He's a good golfer, everybody.
We started after a short break for a call with a world leader in the president's office on board.
You just had me in the office here, and you had a phone call with the leader from Belarus, Lukashenko. And you talked about this meeting. Can I ask you what he told you about the possibilities?
Well, I really called him to thank him. He released 16 prisoners, and it was a very nice thing. They've been trying to get these 16 people out for a long time. Biden was obviously unable to do it. Even other countries, because it's not just Americans. And he was great. He let them out, and I just called to thank him. And believe it or not, there's about 1,300 more, and I think he'll let them out, too, at some point in the very near future.
And what about his thoughts about this meeting that you're going to in Alaska?
He was very positive about it. He's friends with President Putin, as you know, very, very close neighbors. And they work together. And he thinks that President Putin wants to make a deal. He wants to stop this horrible killing. He mentioned it himself. He said it's a horrible situation. And he said he has great respect for me and for the country, but he didn't have a lot of respect for our country under a certain different leader. And I can understand that because nobody else did either.
So what are your expectations? I mean, is the goal of this meeting in Alaska to walk away with a ceasefire?
So when you talk about deals, it's all I do. My whole life I do deals. You never know. You don't like to have too many expectations. You want it because you have to weave and bob, and you don't know what's going to happen. But we're going to go and find out. I'd like to see a ceasefire. I wouldn't be thrilled if I didn't get it, but everyone says you're not going to get the ceasefire. It'll take place on the second meeting. The second meeting is going to be but I'm not going to be happy with that. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to be, I won't be happy if I walk away without some form of a ceasefire. Now, I say this, and I've said it from the beginning, this is really setting the table today. We're going to have another meeting if things work out, which will be very soon. Or we're not going to have any more meetings at all, maybe ever.
But don't you sense that Putin comes to this table maybe in an economic pinch, and that maybe the things you've already done have put him in an economic pitch? Is there an economic side to this, as Russia hoping to open up to the world?
Well, he lost an oil client, so to speak, which is India, which was doing about 40% of the oil. China, as you know, is doing a lot. And others, I have another few countries. And if I did what's called a secondary sanction or a secondary tariff, it would be, very devastating from their standpoint. If I have to do it, I'll do it. Maybe I won't have to do it.
He's coming, though, with the thought that maybe there's going to be a deal on the economy. He's coming with businessmen and...
Yeah, they're bringing a lot of people. Over 500 people are coming. A lot of them are businessmen. And what they really would like to do is, look, we built in a short period of time the greatest economy ever. I had the 4 greatest years ever as an economy, and this is going to blow it away. We're doing well. We were a dead country. And I say this often, I'll say it loud and clear. We were a dead country a year ago, a dead country, not respected by anybody. We had inflation at levels that we had never had before. They say 48 years. I say it was worse than ever before.
So if you were to paint a picture of what perfect looks like coming out of Alaska today, what does that look like in your mind?
Look, it's not for me to negotiate a deal for Ukraine, but I can certainly set the table to negotiate the deal. And our next meeting will have President Zelensky and President Putin and probably me. I'd like to focus on doing our country, but, I get these interruptions. I've solved 6 wars in 6 months when you think about it. And that's from Pakistan to India. That was going to be a terrible one. Planes being shot down. That was getting ready to flare, and then nuclear powers and so many others. And,
Well, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Congo, Rwanda. In fact, did you see that Hillary Clinton yesterday said that if you got this deal done and not capitulate to Putin, that she would nominate you for the Nobel Peace Prize?
If President Trump were the architect of that, I'd nominate him for a Nobel Peace Prize.
Well, that was very nice. I may have to start liking her again. I will say this. This is an important meeting. The second meeting potentially is more important. It could be more finality. It's not for me to negotiate for Ukraine, but I think I have a pretty good idea what they'd like to see and what's good and what's not good. But more importantly than the deals and all of the things we've been talking about in their lives, they've lost right now 5,000 to 7,000. They're losing a week, mostly soldiers, Russian and Ukraine soldiers. Think of this. You have Russian soldiers, you have Ukrainian soldiers. They're losing on average 5,000. Last week, they lost 7,011 soldiers and some other people where bombs were lobbed into Kiev and other places. It's something that has to stop. And I'll tell you what, if I didn't win this election and if I wasn't doing this, you right now could be in a 3rd World War. That was heading to a 3rd World War,
You've said before that we got a lot of BS thrown at us by Putin. What is it about an in-person meeting that makes you think he's not going to, in your words, give you BS? I mean, how are you going to trust him because you can look across the table at him?
Well, look, I've known him very well. I had a very good relationship despite the Russia hoax. It was a hoax. And that really made the relationship much harder. But I had a good relationship with him. We had no problems. We had, a country that we were getting along. We were doing fine. We have tremendous potential. Russia has very valuable land. We have tremendous potential to have a great relationship, a great business relationship. But we couldn't do it because of the crooked, demented people that created the phony Russia. And I told him, I said, Vladimir, there's no way we're going to make a deal. You know that.
Are you going to add anything or just let the video play?
No, not
That's
tough.
your
It's
president
impossible.
talking.
Because
Shut the
I
fuck
have
up.
wise guys that created a phony deal, and until that settled up, that
You
was
shut up and
the
listen.
hoax, the big hoax, the greatest. Well, one of the greatest hoax. I think we have a lot of others that we can talk about, all by the same group of very, very bad Americans.
Vladimir
I'm
Putin
gonna
invaded
be nice
Ukraine
when I
because
say
of
it
the
that way.
Russiagate conspiracies.
But we have a potential to do some very good things at this meeting. One of the
like
things,
the proper way to analyze this is to say Biden postured aggressively against Russia because of the Russiagate hoax, but he can't even fucking get that. His brain is so slop and his statements are so sloppy that he can't even make a coherent narrative out of
Vladimir
it.
Putin. So there has to be some sense that you have going into this that you're going to have something. Because
That would be the coherent narrative.
otherwise, you said
This
you
is not a
go in and look
an
across
assessment
the,
on whether
the
it's
table
truthful
and
or
be
not.
able to
I'm
say
just
in the
saying that
first 2
that would make
minutes
more sense if he
whether
was
it
like,
gonna
"Oh,
happen or
Democrats
not."
were really posturing against
I'll
Russia."
be able to tell very quickly whether or not
because they
good
whipped
meeting.
themselves up into
A
a
good
frenzy
meeting
because they lost to me and they couldn't deal with that, so they had to blame a foreign nation over and over again, and then they whipped themselves up into a frenzy and postured too aggressively against Russia, which then caused Russia to be fearful and invade Ukraine or some shit. You
next
know,
week. So we're going to have a second meeting. Now, it could be
I could
that if
message
this
better than
meeting's bad
him
enough
for him.
that I'm gone.
1986, Reagan walks away from Reykjavik with Gorbachev, and it was a strong moment. I mean, you could foresee if it goes down a bad path, you get up and walk away.
I'm not doing it based on history, based on anything else. I'm doing it based on a deal.
Uh-oh,
if we
there's
make
movement.
a deal, great. If I see that there's no hope of making
Wait, they ended it
a
early?
deal, I'm out of there.
There's
It's
an hour
over.
and
I'm out of
30
there. This
still
isn't
that
my
remains.
war. This is Biden's war. This is Biden screwed this up, just like he did with Afghanistan with that horrible retreat. And the way he did it, I'll never forget it. That was the most embarrassing day in the history of our country. Well, this is Biden's war, too. This is a war that should have never happened. I saw it for 4 years. It didn't happen.
Trump hasn't been doing semen retention techniques. He busted too early.
Apple of his eye. Ukraine was the apple of his eye.
He
There was
busted
no
too
way
early
he
and
was gonna
busted too
move on it.
hard.
I'll tell you, you have a very similar thing with President Xi of China and Taiwan. But I don't believe there's any way it's going to happen as long as I'm here. We'll see. He told me, I will never do it as long as you're president. President Xi told me that. And I said, well, I appreciate that. But he also said, but I am very patient. And China is very patient. I said, well, that's up to you. But it better not happen now.
These guys, both Xi and Putin, have said things before that they didn't live up to, or they did other things. And, when you were campaigning, you said, we can solve this right away, 24 hours. You got into it. You've explained it's much more complex. It's
For
tougher,
those
right?
asking, what does it mean that the
So I
conference
thought this
ended
would
earlier?
be-
Or the
I
press
said it was
conference
6
happening
wars.
before it was supposed to, when they are supposed to have
Recently,
another hour
like
and 30 minutes? I have
Congo
no
was
fucking
going
idea.
on. This
I'm
was
going to be
with
very
Rwanda,
honest with
was
you.
going on for
I don't know what this
31
means.
years, and I got it
I
settled.
genuinely don't
We
know what
have
this
a
fucking
case with-
means.
Take a look at
I don't know.
Cambodia. Take a look at so many. And the most difficult ones turned out to be easy. The easiest one, which should be this one, turned out to be the toughest.
And that's because of Putin?
Well, it's because of a lot of things. It's because of personalities that don't get along very well. I mean, President Zelensky and President Putin did not get along. Again, I inherited this. I came in, I got very angry at people yesterday. I came in.
So you were
and I said,
wrong in
"What
your
the hell?
assessments? Are you talking to
inherited this
me? I made
mess.
no fucking
I inherited a
speculation.
mess from Biden with the economy, with
I've actively
inflation,
said from the
with
start,
high
I don't know
taxes,
which way
with
this
so many
goes. I
other
just
things.
don't know
You
if
said
we'll
that there could
get
be very severe consequences if
a
Putin
real
doesn't do a ceasefire, if this
ceasefire
falls
commitment.
apart. But you've also in the past said that sanctions you don't think
and I hope I'm wrong.
really affect Russia because he's gotten around him before. What does severe look like?
Severe. Let me just tell you one other one. Cambodia, Thailand. It was starting. It was, and I got it right at the beginning. But many people are dead right along the border.
Oh my God,
And I
brother,
happened to
shut
be
the
talking
fuck
to one of
up.
the
Oh
two
my
parties.
God. Oh my
I said,
God. Oh
Are
my
you guys
God.
going to war again? Because they've been fighting for, as they said, 500 years. I said, how long are you fighting? Said, 500 years, on and off, right? I said, this is not good. I got that one solved. So we're going to see what happens. We're going to have a meeting today. Hopefully it'll be good. If it's bad, if it's something I don't see a future in, I'm a deal guy. If it's something I don't see a future in, I'm gone. I'll leave. I don't have to do a press. I'll just say,
This
not
happened
gonna
very
be a
fast.
deal.
Press here
I'm
for
outta
Trump.
here.
Putin joined presser. We're
And I
told to
go
get
back
into
to the
seats quickly,
United
and that
States,
it could begin
and
in
I preside
10
over
minutes from now.
the
This is earlier than
economy that-
expected. Both
wait till
podiums
you
are
see
set
what's
up.
happening with all of this. You know, we have trillions of dollars pouring in. Even people that were against tariffs only because they didn't understand tariffs, they didn't even know what a tariff was. You had economists that didn't even know what a tariff was. They're all my biggest fan now. They're also, you see it. We have an
What?
economy that's
You
gonna
had
be
economists that didn't know what a
best ever,
tariff
I
was.
think,
Is
in the
so
history
funny.
of our
Only
world.
Trump knows what a
Land in
tariff
Air
is.
Force One. It sends a different signal. It's a pretty good way to travel. And we're going to land in this base in Alaska that's going to have a lot of military equipment there on the ground. It's pretty impressive.
Well, I think people are going to be impressed, and I hope your cameras can look at it. It's a very big base, and it's got a lot of great equipment. We have F-22s. We have the B-2 bomber that everyone saw. How about that? 36 hours back and forth.
We don't
Not
know if
a
it's going to be
screw
a
was
joint
loose,
presser. Who knows?
Not a plane
Who
went
knows?
down, even from a mechanical standpoint. If you take a look at the last raid into Iran,
My
it was-
prediction is Russia gives Ukraine back the territory in exchange for NATO membership. Yeah. Yeah, Russia withdraws its troops from Ukraine and then says Ukraine can join NATO. That's what's going to happen.
Message to the world.
It sent a message, and that plane is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. But when you land, you'll see the B-2s. You'll see,
Sunni
I think, the
and
most
Yufi.
beautiful fighter
Thank you
jet
for
in
the
the
10
world is
gifted.
the F-22. You're going to see F-35s all over the place. It's a big base. You're going to see lots
Oh,
of
you're saying
equipment,
Russia
and I hope
joins
your cameras
NATO.
can cover it because it will be very impressive.
Mr. President, thanks for the time. Thanks for the ride, and we'll talk to you on the way back. Just deplaned. We're in Alaska, Air Force One here on the ground. Just minutes before President Putin is scheduled to land, they rolled out the red carpet, literally the red carpet, and a number of B-2s and F-22s here in Alaska. All right, on the ground here, breaking tonight, just word now from the press room as you look there live that the meeting has ended. After 3 hours, the meeting is ended, and we're hearing that the press conference may be imminent. You see the backdrop there with the two podiums pursuing peace. They have called the press pool into that room, which is on the other side of this base, and they are getting prepared for what seems like an imminent press conference. This is a lot sooner, about an hour and 10 minutes sooner than we thought. There was going to be some downtime. There was going to be a little bit of space in between these. This seems like they're doing this a little quicker. Jackie Heinrich's on her way over there. In the meantime, let's bring in our panel. Harold Ford Jr., former Tennessee congressman, co-host of The Five. We also have the Fox News senior strategic analyst, retired General Jack Keane, and host of Sunday Night in America, Trey Gowdy. General, let me start with you. The thought that this is moving a little bit quicker. You heard the interview on Air Force One. We expected this news conference maybe in about an hour
and a half, maybe hour and 15 minutes. It seems like it's moving a little bit quicker now as they get reporters in place. Your thoughts about this? They clearly were behind closed doors for about 3 hours.
Well, I think the fact that they spent that much time together is a good thing. There's a lot of issues to discuss, and they were discussing them. And I think, this is very different, the way this president operates. He operates from the top down when he's doing negotiations. Usually it's a step-by-step process at lower staff levels to identify the issues and try to resolve them. And then when you bring in the principals, a lot of things have already been resolved as a result of that. But the president has enormous confidence in himself, in his ability to feel out an adversary or a counterpart and make judgments right while that's taking place and make decisions. And we've seen him do this time and time again. And he's obviously much more successful at this than he has setbacks, for sure. So I think what we're going to see here is likely something positive, given it lasted that long and there's a joint press conference. And that's what we're all hoping for. Certainly the people of Ukraine want to see that as a positive result. And I would imagine if there really is going to be a next step, there's a lot of real detailed work ahead in terms of what that next step is, and also that would likely bring, as he has advertised more than once, President Zelensky, you can't
Alaska.
make a deal about Ukraine's future.
This is a joint
without
press
President
conference. I assume a
Zelensky
positive
sitting at the
announcement.
table. So
Yeah.
And he said
If it is actually a joint press conference, because they're not going to
like.
like take out one of the podiums.
And let's dip
Right?
into that room.
Like they
Jackie
set it
Heineman's
up
just,
in preparation for a joint press
there.
conference, so who
Jackie,
knows?
Kind of got the red alert that this was the time, right?
Yeah, Brett, we were moved
But I
as
assume it
the press
is.
corps into these seats and told that this news conference could begin as soon as 10 minutes away. That was about 10 minutes ago, and it happened pretty suddenly. As far as we were aware, the expanded bilateral lunch that the president was supposed to have that included the Secretary of Treasury, the
Russian
Secretary
Defense
of
Minister says
Commerce,
he's in an
the
excellent
Chief of
mood
Staff, Susan
following
Wiles,
meeting.
and also
What
Defense
the
Secretary.
fuck?
That had not yet happened. As far as we were told, the president was still in that 3-on-3 meeting that included Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Steve Witkoff, and then also on the Russian side with Putin, Lavrov, and a foreign policy aide. And we were told by the president that if things were not going well, he was going to call this off, send Putin home, and address the press alone. So, of course, when we were hurried into our seats, we were watching the stage to see if a second podium came down. It has not. And we had a gentleman come out and just do a sound check in Russian at the second podium. So we expect to see both leaders here. But of course, it is in advance of the timeline that we were expecting, which just might be a signal that the president got through the items that he cared to talk about and maybe was not going to entertain the long list of other things that Russia had on its mind, namely economic partnerships and different agreements where the U.S.-Russia relationship could move forward. The president has made pretty clear that his main objective today is to get a ceasefire so that a second meeting can be set up, because Ukraine has made clear that a prerequisite for a second meeting is a ceasefire. And the president told reporters on Air Force One today he was not going to be happy if he didn't get that. So we expect to hear from them soon, but this was a very quick movement. And
Video of Trump and Putin walking out of the meeting. Okay, let's get the body analysis here. The restricted format talks between President Vladimir Putin and President Donald Trump have concluded. Putin looks happy. Where's Trump? I mean, yeah, it's going to be secondary negotiations are going to happen, but who knows if this means that there will be a cessation of hostilities or not in the interim. I don't know what Donald Trump gave up in exchange. I don't even know what Putin gave up, if he gave up anything at all.
Хотя бы как настроение, Андрей Романович?
Настроение
The
всегда
mood is always
одинаково,
the same.
отлично.
It's great.
Отлично.
Okay, that doesn't mean much.
Антон Германович, как переговоры прошли? Ну,
How did negotiations go? Wait, what did he say?
ну,
Да.
Calling it now, but an alternative timeline where America joins Russia and both invade Ukraine. The World War III starts with everyone jumping Europe, including China, or they just exchange puppies to sign a goodwill. Rate my prediction. Yeah, I don't know if that's a good. He just said, duh. There's supposed to be another meeting. The Kremlin says the short format meeting is over. They are supposed to do another one, but it's not clear if that is happening. Siluanov and Belousov are meant to be in that, and they're in the front row waiting for the presser. This is every day. They just openly communicate their genocidal desires, their genocidal ambitions, their interest in more territorial expansion. Every day they openly state what they are doing, and yet it falls on deaf ears in the Western world. But I guess this is a sign of change in the positive direction when you got Sky News also covering this stuff.
Sanctioned by the UK for inciting violence against Palestinians in the West Bank, Israel's far-right finance minister has plenty of friends up here. And that's because his plan to start work on what's known as the E1 settlement, which would connect Ma'ale Adumim in the West Bank to East Jerusalem, is a long-held dream of the Israeli settler movement.
Yes, I covered the 972 magazine investigative reporting on the unit that Israel created called the Legitimization Cell, which was a unit that they specifically tasked with creating fake information about journalists, creating fake information. So there was the short form meeting that was supposed to take place until 4:30. That was cut shorter, an hour shorter specifically. And then there's supposed to be another second meeting with a larger group of people. And I don't know. I don't know where that goes. I truly don't know. And I don't know why we should speculate at this point, because obviously it's going to happen in a second.
There's a bill, by the way, a Senate bill, and you're signed on to it.
I'm one of the original co-sponsors. Over 80 senators co-sponsored.
Now, the White House is not buying into that yet because they want to control the situation. Is that fair?
I think the White House is working with our Majority Leader, Senator Thune and Lindsey Graham, closely on when to unleash that. But there's good cooperation between the White House and the Senate on that sanctions bill.
So when you look at this, getting ready to come out, the two leaders, what do you think, not knowing what they said behind the scenes, but heading in, they had to have some framework that they were looking for?
Yeah, look, I think the president, and your interviews were great, congratulations, but I think the president has been very clear that this is a table-setting exercise with the threshold issue, a ceasefire. So whether or not they got the ceasefire or not, I think is going to be really important. I was actually pleased to see Secretary Hegseth here, the NATO commander, the Supreme Allied Commander, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, because if there's going to be a ceasefire, those are the experts you need to see how you would lock that down. But that's the important threshold issue, it seems to me, with the president. And then, you know, then he talks about if it's not, we're going to have severe consequences. I think the fact that he's talking about severe consequences, you know, I was on Air Force One right when the president landed to greet him. But, you know, he talked about, hey, we will move to severe consequences, and maybe secondary sanctions on China could be coming if this isn't successful. So I hope the threshold issue of a ceasefire has been reached, and if that's the case, this is a very successful summit.
We're getting word now from the pool. It could be 5 minutes, the two leaders coming out. You'll see it obviously right here on Fox News Channel. Senator, thank you. Stand by if you would. Harold Ford Jr., I want to get you
It's a joint press conference. It's official. The Kremlin says Putin and Trump will hold their press conference soon.
What we're seeing right now.
First,
the Alaska Summit was meant to start with just Putin and Trump one-on-one with their translators, but now Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff will join Trump.
He laid out,
they turned it into, instead of a one-on-one meeting, they turned into a three-on-three meeting, and now they're doing a joint press conference.
Able to end this war.
Is it going to be live? Yes, in a second, in a minute.
They said he could end it immediately. Here he is now, just less than 9 months into his administration, and we're about to, I believe, as General Keane said, here's something very positive. I think Senator Sullivan's saying the same thing. I think the audience that will be most intent and most closely listening to this evening, Brett, will be the Ukrainians. They're obviously are not there tonight.
Where
Mr.
at any moment, President Trump
channeled through President Trump. And you have to think something positive, something meaningful. It's unclear to me, it's going to be said tonight, it's unclear to me if President Trump has been able to mute or lessen the ambitions of President Putin, who, as we all know, seeks to...
Based on everything I've seen so far, it probably went really good for Russia. I doubt that there is any sort of significant concessions that they agreed to, especially because the conditions that are set forth are determined by the battle lines, and on the battle line side, Russia is winning. Russia has hardened its positions in eastern Ukraine and is now slated to take over even more territory militarily, leading up to this conversation. So, for that reason alone, I don't think that they have. I mean, they have the leverage.
Yeah, Brad, I can tell
Part of the reason why I also feel this way is because Donald Trump has actively talked about how Russia could take all of Ukraine. Like he's soft launching territorial concessions over and over again, claiming Russia could take so much more if they wanted to, but they're not. Saying this is not removing himself from the equation, saying I don't need to stop this war at all, but I'm doing it for the Ukrainians. A war that Biden started, a war that Zelensky started, making it seem as though no matter what he gives to Russia, it's actually still at the behest of the Ukrainians, even if it's going to be something that the Ukrainians didn't want, objectively did not want. Why are there 37,000 people here on a Friday evening? I don't know, because an incredibly consequential meeting of two foreign adversaries has just taken place. And this could potentially, this is a world-changing event, potentially.
He was trying to get Congress to stay engaged. He was also sending a message to Putin in that interview. Here's just a piece of it.
And Trump, he said that I want to be in the middle. Otherwise, I will not put these guys at the table.
And is he right?
I want to be very honest. I want really him to be more at our side. I will explain why. Because it's not just that the war began somewhere between our countries. The war began when Russia brought this war to our country, and they're not right.
I've actually interviewed President Zelensky a number of times. That was after his contentious Oval Office meeting with President Trump and Vice President Vance, about a year later, but we were on the front lines before that. General Keane, as the Ukrainians watch this moment at the two podiums, what do you think's going through their minds?
Yeah, they're probably saying a lot of prayers, frankly. When it comes to President Zelensky, he's always wanted to meet with Putin. And Putin's never wanted to meet with him. And I believe, in the early stages of this so-called summit,
yeah, okay, that's
there was some thought that the three leaders would meet together. But Putin did not want Zelensky participating in the initial meeting. Trump did not
that's
insist
just not
on
true.
It because he still felt an in-person meeting with him and Putin, following on to the several phone calls they had, would be an important ingredient, and there was value in it. And it certainly wasn't.
Why are you watching Fox?
Losing.
Because I'm going to switch over anyway, but you need to understand what the enemy is thinking and what the enemy is saying.
By then, saying that basically a victory for President Trump would require him to walk away with an unconditional ceasefire. That word unconditional, hugely significant, Tom. They say if there are strings attached, that would be a victory for President Putin. So
also because I'm a conservative, I'm an American patriot. I'm an American patriotic conservative. I'm a reactionary.
Have to say, is this announcement one of process, or is there a real agreement that has been reached? Will there be a second meeting? And of course, the big question looming over all of this, does President Trump acknowledge that it is President Putin who is the aggressor in this case? That is what Democratic sources say they would like to hear from this president. This is, of course, a conflict that has divided the Republican Party. Some 51% of Americans disapprove of President Trump's handling of the war in Ukraine. Remember, he promised to end this in 24 hours of being elected. He has acknowledged it's proven more difficult than even he anticipated. So this is one of the biggest tests of his second term, Tom.
Christian, stand by for us. We are getting some new reporting. This coming from the Kremlin. The Kremlin announcing this in Russia, that the news conference of the president of Russia and the U.S. will begin shortly. I want to go back to Peter Alexander. We see him there in the screen in front of the two podiums there. Peter, my question to you, I know you have trouble hearing because it's loud there. Do we know if the American press will be allowed to ask questions at this news conference?
Tom, it's a good question. We don't have an answer to that one yet. In fact, this came together very quickly. We did anticipate a news conference. It wasn't clear that both presidents would be here, though that was the initial expectation. Now the Kremlin has announced that Vladimir Putin will be here alongside Donald Trump. I was just speaking to some of the top White House advisors if they could give us any timing on this, any more specifics. They basically said, just wait. A Russian advisor to the president moments ago telling reporters when asked what happened behind closed doors, he said, you'll have to wait to hear for yourself. So there is certainly a lot of anticipation about the way that this is going to play out right now. One in particular occurred there, whether they were able to come to some agreement on a ceasefire, whether the topic of, in the words of the president, divvying up Ukraine did come up, even though European allies and Ukraine itself have urged President Trump not to discuss that very topic without Ukraine in the room. So, in effect, we are right now in what Donald Trump in TV terms would describe as a cliffhanger. We wait to see exactly what happened here, specifically as it relates to those meetings. And certainly, as we've been listening to a lot of the Russian reporters here, including those from state television, they view this perhaps in much wider terms, beyond just the topics of a ceasefire, a potential peace deal as it related to Ukraine. They view this more broadly as an opportunity to restore a strained relationship between the United States and Russia, between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin themselves. So we will anticipate with you what happens, and we'll certainly have a lot of questions we want to ask both presidents. Whether we get that opportunity remains to be seen.
Peter, before you go, because we can see from the wide pool shot where you're standing right now, you seem to be kind of close to the front row, at least from where we're looking. Can you see which members of the Trump administration or cabinet members are already there, and or the Russians, or have they not arrived just yet?
Yeah, there are members of both delegations here. They're seated in the first rows on each side. Some members of the Russian delegation and of the American delegation. Notably, none of those individuals who were inside the early meeting that took place today, lasting more than 2.5 hours, are present for the U.S. That's the Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, Marco Rubio, the National Security Advisor and Secretary of State. They are not here as well. The expanded bilateral meeting, what was supposed to take place over lunch, was to include some of the top advisors economically for the president. The Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, Howard Lutnick is the Commerce Secretary. They were among those who were expected to be in attendance. But to this point, we don't know whether there was in some form an abbreviated expanded bilateral, or if they're just coming from what was a 3-on-3 meeting with their interpreters before arriving here. Tom, to pull back the curtain a little bit, this has been a remarkable day. In more than 13 years of covering the White House, I have not seen security like that, which we have witnessed here today as the American and Russian reporters were welcomed onto Joint Base Elmendorf Richardson. They each went through separate, in effect, vetting where they were swept to check for any equipment that wasn't allowed to be brought in, any weapons or anything of that kind. And one of the Secret Service officers heading up that process said to me that this was a much more meticulous process than you normally see. So meticulous that as we waited on buses to enter, there were literally Secret Service agents who were opening up each of the pre-prepared lunch boxes, breakfast boxes that were being brought in for those individuals who would be inside here, just to check them so that nothing was snuck onto the property here before today's meeting take place. If we look around this room, I would tell you there's probably a couple hundred individuals here, certainly a full contingent of reporters who cover the White House, the president, on a daily basis. There are dozens of Russian reporters as well, but there are also reporters from all across the world, all of whom obviously would be impacted by the potential of any agreement of any kind as it relates to this 3.5-year relentless war after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Tom?
And I do want to ask you about the reporters in the room, Peter, because explain to our viewers here, are most of the people that are in that room reporters? And how, in a news conference like this, a bilateral news conference, will people get to ask questions? opened up to questions, right? Because any reporter on any part of this globe would want to be in there right now asking those two men questions.
Yeah, it's a good question. We don't know the answer to that. I can tell you that every reporter that I'm seated around certainly has questions prepared. I'm sure there'll be a cacophony of voices as they all try to get heard by the president here, trying to get his attention. President Trump, when he holds news conferences regularly, does it a bit differently than past presidents, where he just sort of picks and chooses and calls on individuals as he likes. Whether or not there are some
both Trump and Putin do a similar press conference style. Let's just say
there are some opening statements, and I think that's where we will all be listening very closely to get a better understanding of what, if anything, was agreed to, what came of this private conversation, what it means.
The only difference in this situation is that even like the Trump dick riders and glazers also still hate Putin, so they might actually ask some contentious adversarial questions in Putin's direction, with the exception of like Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend, who will probably stand up and say, Mr. Putin, you are so handsome and I love you. Like the opposite of what he did to Zelensky.
Right now. So there's just so many topics and so many questions, not the least of which relates to the killing, the deaths that have taken place across Ukraine over the course of this 40-plus months. Hundreds of thousands of people have been killed, certainly tens of thousands in Ukraine.
Fucks with Putin, they hate Ukraine? No. A lot of those reporters, even at like Fox News and shit, you're not paying attention if you think that like Fox News is pro-Putin. Fox News is not pro-Putin and not pro-Russia at all. They literally actively, every time they talk to Trump, they actively have to walk him off of saying incredibly kind and pleasant things about Vladimir Putin. Members of the media are also still very much invested in Russia is a foreign adversary that needs to be attacked. So I could totally see them asking contentious questions to Vladimir Putin if given the opportunity. I can't speak on the Russian media team. I don't know what their situation is with respect to Trump. Like, I don't know if they would ask him any adversarial questions. I doubt it, but who knows? Also, come on, man. This was supposed to fucking happen already. What's going on?
Much earlier than we've expected.
They're teasing us,
I don't
bro.
want to lean too heavily on precedent here, but despite the best efforts of the White House to lower expectations about this meeting today, they got ratcheted back up by the president's comments on Air Force One, suggesting he'd be very upset if there wasn't a ceasefire to announce today, and by the stagecraft of this event. This is not some small meeting to set up a larger meeting, Tom. This is very clearly something that has been amped up by the president. The fact that Vladimir Putin is still here, that there are two podiums, that they're coming out, does suggest there's some positive development. I want to key in on something that Peter said, because I think this could be the delay that we're in right now. The president said earlier in this week that Zelensky would be among the first people he would tell if there was news out of this. That could very well be what's responsible for this delay right now.
Yeah, the president could be calling the leader of Ukraine, who is right now fighting a wartime president, to let him know of any developments. I do want to bring in the former U.S. ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul, who has a tremendous amount of experience in bilateral meetings, in meeting foreign dignitaries, including Vladimir Putin. Ambassador McFaul, what do you make of what we've seen so far? We were told possibly the meeting could be up to 7 hours long. It was less than 3 hours. We're awaiting this news conference. I know it's all speculation at this point, but what do you think's happening behind closed doors?
Well, I'm just speculating, but I have been in these meetings with Vladimir Putin and President Obama. Sometimes the small group meeting goes longer. So the one that they just had goes so long that the larger meeting with the full delegation gets squeezed and maybe in this case canceled altogether. So that could be happening. I know the people in that delegation. I see the Russian delegation right now. I see Kirill Dmitriev's head. He is sitting right in the front row. And that suggests to me that the press conference is going to happen before lunch or there's no lunch because he was supposed to be one of the delegates in the wider meeting.
Yeah, Trump is announcing that he's arming Russia instead of Ukraine.
Bad outcome or a good outcome.
We got to even the playing field. They're buying so many of our weapons, folks. Are you going to buy it? Are you going to buy? Oh, Witkoff is in the building.
Ambassador McFaul, I'm going to tell you, it looks like we have Steve Witkoff, special envoy, who's done a lot of the negotiations with Vladimir Putin. He actually had the meeting that was the meeting before this one that essentially set the table so this could happen here in Alaska on U.S. soil. It looks like other members of the cabinet are going to be making their way inside right now. Ambassador McFaul, what is a victory for the United States, but maybe more importantly for Ukraine to come out of this meeting?
Well, I'm glad you phrased it that way, because summits are supposed to be about what's good for us, the American people, not what's good for Putin or Trump individually. And I think the way we should measure success are our American security interests advanced as a result of this meeting. And in my view, we have a security interest in preventing Putin from dominating and annexing territory in Ukraine. So that's what I'm going to be focused on. Have the president advance that ball, because he put a lot of work into this meeting. I mean, literally a red carpet for a imperial dictator who has, not since Hitler.
Putin says Donald Trump gets to have a Trump Tower in Donbass. If he concedes to legal annexation, legal recognition of annexed territories, he gets to have a Trump Tower in the LPR and the DPR. If he builds, Donbass Riviera, yep. He